Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to welcome you to ENTSO-E's webinar focusing on what keeps TSO DSO leaders awake at night, and I should say busy in the day as well. And here we have been cooperating with the World Energy Council this time, and also, of course, with our DSO partners, with ENTSO, that has done a similar survey with their membership earlier this year. I'm Susanne Nies. I'm heading the strategy and communication section, and I'm extremely happy to introduce our distinguished panelists. We have Norela Constantinescu. She's the lead research and innovation in ENTSO-E. We have Angela Wilkinson, who is the Senior Director of Scenarios and Business Insights of the World Energy Council. We have Laurent Schmitt, the Secretary General of ENTSO-E, and I think we should thank him here because he has initiated this extremely interesting business network for innovation. We have Juan, who is the technology senior advisor from E.DSO for smart grids, and I'm moderating the panel in the end. So please, if you have any questions, send them through the application. And I'm happy now to hand over to Norela, who's gonna explain to us, on the one hand, this cooperation with WEC, but also the overall ambition with the business network for innovation as part of our research activities. Norela, you have the floor.
Hello, everybody. So welcome to this webinar. I'm pleased to introduce both the Business Network for Innovation, but also the cooperation of ENTSO-E and TSO community, as well as E.DSO and DSO community with the World Energy Council, where we worked together for the last few months, and we have some results today, which will be presented later. So the Business Network for Innovation, which was initiated by ENTSO-E, it helps to support the energy transition and to gather also the business perspective. It's a bridge between us and also startups, citizens, institutions in energy business. We have more than 200 members, and we are pleased to have this type of exchange through the Luncheon's webinars. So we have some activities already on storage, on dynamic line rating, artificial intelligence, common grid model, and we of course will continue to have these exchanges in the future. Suzanne is going to announce this at the end of the webinar. So why the cooperation with the World Energy Council and with this initiative we had, what keeps TSO and DSO leaders awake at night, and also what keeps them busy during the day. So the research and innovation megatrends are important for the TSOs and DSOs as well. So it gives us the broader perspective on where to hand our activities, and particularly for ENTSO-E, we develop the research, development, and innovation roadmap for the TSOs for the period 2020-2030. So we are working on this type of deliverable this year and next year. So we are full on this development. And of course, this type of megatrends, which are identified by the cooperation with the World Energy Council, it's very useful for us, and it will frame actually the top-down priority research and innovation, which we identify in this exercise for the roadmap. It also helps us in the dialogue with the European Commission for establishing the future of the Horizon Europe framework for the TSO activity. And I would like to make maybe a few statements about the major cluster we touch upon. And of course, the most important, and what we will see also from the presentation of WEC, are the market design and uptake of RES. And here we are going to look in the different options we have. We also identify the digital and communication assets as a very important topic of research and innovation activities for the decade to come, as well as what we have in the future of the energy system. And here I would like maybe to emphasize especially the sector coupling activities, being with the transport, being on with the heat sector, or being with the gas sector, for instance. And of course, we will continue to have our clusters of activities related to assets and technologies. So this is for the TSOs, as well as with the security and the operations of tomorrow. The TSO and the DSO, because you are going to listen today also about the feedback from the TSO and the DSO side. It's very important. So what we do as activities today will continue to be enhanced in the future. And actually with the E.DSO, we work together for some years in projects, but also in common activities. And we organize even events today, such as InnoGrid. And I would like to emphasize also related to the work we do with the World Energy Council. So the fact that we have 6 major ideas which were put forward also towards the European Commission, and not only, so towards the European institutions. So first is related to the market design, and we have, for instance, the cooperation on active system management with the DSOs, as well as innovation uptake by the regulation. Of course, another important element is the digitalization, and actually this is important, and you see it as an effort together with the E.DSO, as well as the sector coupling activity. Then I would like to mention something which is maybe not so obvious here, the talent acquisition, and we will hear more about this in the discussion today, as well as the climate framework, which is of course what we have seen in COP21, and the financing regarding the research and innovation, but not only this, the uptake of this type of activities in the business of the TSOs and DSOs, and therefore the relationship with the products like 10-year network development plan, or the activities of Connecting Europe facility on projects of common interest and smart grid projects. So with this, I would like to thank you for your attention, and we go forward back to Susanne to introduce Angela.
Thank you very much, Norela, for this introduction. I'm happy now to welcome Angela Wilkinson, who is an experienced business executive, Oxford scholar, and author, and has a proven track record in senior roles. She was working for strategic foresight at the OECD. She's also an associate fellow with Saïda Business School and the CEO of Oxford Futures Limited. So we're extremely happy to have Angela, who's also having a PhD in physics. And allow me, Angela, our Angela, means I'm German, Angela Merkel is also having a PhD in physics. Okay, so Angela, you have the word.
Thank you, Susanna. I think there are some other differences, but we won't dwell on those. Let's get on with what we have today. First of all, thank you very much to ENTSO-E for this fantastic cooperation on pulling out one of the early segmentation analyses for distribution and transmission system operators. I'm going to talk about how you might make use of the issues monitor. I'm going to present some of the results of what we found in this piece of work, and then I'll talk about some of the commonalities or the differences between, how you compare maybe with other the other parts of the European energy system or utilities. There's also a comparison in that. So next slide, please. For those of you who might not know a little about the World Energy Council, although some of you might be members, we're a bit of an old organisation established in 1923. We're accredited to the UN, and our aim and ambition is really to help deliver a successfully managed global energy transition. And to do that, we are a neutral platform that engages across the whole of the energy system, not just within the electricity sector, also between electricity and the other parts of the energy system, and also increasingly at the interfaces of the energy sector and other sectors, similar to yourself around this issue of sector coupling, buildings, transport, and industry. And we're impartial, as in we're not promoting a certain position around which technology or which resource or what's best, but we're not passive. We think that successful energy transition needs to be well managed. We think transition is inevitable, but the success of a well managed transition is far from guaranteed at present. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk today about the World Energy Issues Monitor and the particular segmentation survey that we have been undertaken with ENTSO-E. And the World Energy Issues Monitor has been running now for a decade. So we compare and contrast the perspectives of thousands of energy leaders from across the world on 42 different issues, and we've been tracking these now for a decade. This is the first time we've done this segmentation analysis for the DSOs and TSOs, so we can't give you any of the tracking analysis insights, but we hope that you'll continue and you'll be able to also look at how issues change over time, which many of our other users find equally as important, not just the initial map. But this is one of 5 tools that we use. Our issues monitor is really our leadership horizon scanning tool that allows us to take a reality check about where are energy leaders what issues are they paying attention to, what are their action priorities, and what keeps them awake at night. Our other tools include world energy scenarios, which really is bigger picture thinking about the future of the whole energy system. And our scenarios are currently looking at 2040 and the disruptive innovation play. We also have an energy policy trilemma, where we assess national performance on policy against 3 different dimensions of transition: security, affordability, and sustainability. And increasingly we find, and our members are able to use these tools not just individually but in combination. So quite often people combine the issues monitor maps with the scenarios and think about what progress might look like, or they use the scenarios to stress test their trilemma trajectories and think about what's the gap between where they want to go with their vision and where they are with their realities. Next slide, please. So let's turn to the study in hand, and this first ever issues monitor segmentation analysis, which does a deep dive into the perspectives of energy leaders within European DSOs and TSOs. So what I'm going to present to you today is I'm going to present what do the different maps of the DSOs and TSOs in Europe look like, and I'll talk about how do they compare with the European regional perspective for the whole of the energy system, and also how can we compare and contrast the differences between ESO and E.DSO perspectives. Next slide, please. So let me start with a bigger picture from our European, from the European Regional Issues Monitor, that we published in February. So if you were to look inside the brochure, you have this map. But if you look at inside the brochure, you'll also have the global map. But if we look at the European landscape of issues, what we see is this map has been put together from surveys conducted within 23 of the 28 EU member countries. And the map reveals the top 3 key priorities for action that are perceived by energy leaders in the European context. And those 3 priorities are digitization, of course, the shift from analog to the latest technologies, including smart meters and smart grids. That's shifted from being a curious issue in 2010 when we first started the issue. It's moved to becoming a much more high priority and a much more important. It's shifted from being a critical uncertainty to being an action priority after 2014. The second key action priority is, of course, around the in renewable energies and the continued rapid reduction in cost effectiveness, in cost comparability of renewable energies. The third key action priority is electricity prices, and underpinnings associated with that is there's also a question around energy efficiency, and subsidies have also been 4th or 5th order issues around key action priorities. On the global regional level, for the whole of the energy system, critical uncertainties for Europe are, first of all, market design, secondly, European cohesion, and thirdly, electrical storage. And there are also a 4th order effect would be around data and artificial intelligence, which of course is very important for asset management. So in terms of the bigger European picture and landscape of where this segmentation analysis will fit in, those for energy leaders of the whole system are the key priority areas. If I move now to looking at the first deep dive that we have for the distribution service system operators, if I could have the next slide. This is what the issues monitor map looks like for the distribution system operators who responded to this survey in Europe. Now, we had responses from 22 out of 43 of the members, and you read the map by looking at it as though it's a quadrant analysis. So you have one axis, one of the axes is about uncertainty, and the other axis is about impact. And so we pay attention particularly to what's coming into the right-hand side of the map, and towards the top right-hand corner, we look at what are the critical uncertainties, and at the bottom right-hand side, we look at what's keeping energy leaders awake at night in terms of action priorities. So in terms of the perspectives of the DSOs in Europe, the key priorities for action are the decentralization of systems and, of course, the renewable energy success story that's going on. From the interviews, we also picked up, there's a set of interviews that also supplement this survey. We also picked up innovative transport as a key action priority. In terms of the key uncertainties that are keeping energy leaders in DSOs awake at night, the 3 are cyber threats, of course, the issues of meter hacking and the possibilities of new vulnerabilities that are coming in from all this smart technology interface. The climate framework, and particularly the challenges of what's happening in Europe and also the shifts that are happening in other parts of the world in terms of what will be the priority in international relations to climate. And the third critical uncertainty is around talent. And that's also a priority for TSOs, as we'll come to have a look at. And interestingly, a remarkable difference between what's the priority for DSOs and TSOs in Europe and less priority on talent by the global level map of energy leaders from across the world. So the action priorities are where energy leaders have a clear idea about how they need to move these issues into their agenda. And the uncertainties are areas that are getting more attention, but energy leaders have yet to work out how to integrate them into their action planning. Now, these are the top 3 issues for each of those areas out of a landscape of 42 different issues. Now, if the survey was repeated, we'd be able to tell you how those different issues track through time, whether they're increasing in importance, whether they're getting more uncertain or whether they're becoming more action priorities, or whether they're moving to the left-hand side where they're not less important, but they aren't the centre of attention. If I move now to the interviews that have been also conducted as part of this work, the next slide, please. We get a little bit of a richer feel around how to interpret these top-level action priorities and critical uncertainties, and we understand a little bit more about how talent is, why talent is such an important issue. So from these interviews, we pick out also that innovative transport is also a key uncertainty for the DSO area, and that the talent issue is really about attracting and retaining the workforce, particularly seeing as the increasingly we get the digitalization, decentralization of energy systems in Europe, talent is being competed with by the digital majors and the Information and Communications Technology Centre. If I move now to the TSO map, the next slide, please. Again, we have a similar sort of landscape, 42 issues, but we're highlighting what are the top priorities for action and the top uncertainties as perceived by energy leaders in this segment. We had responses from 26 of the 43 transmission system operators in this survey. And the priorities for TSOs, which slightly differ from those of the DSOs, are now market design and, in common with the DSO, digitization. And a third order priority was around the issues of AI and machine learning. So we see, in common with the DSOs, TSO leaders are concerned about needing to act on the opportunities and also the new challenges of digitization. But there's a difference in their emphasis around on decentralization of systems by the DSOs and the need for market design by the TSOs. If I look at the three key uncertainties as perceived by energy leaders, for the European TSOs, these three priorities are decommissioning, talent, and the climate framework. I'll come on to a bit more about those when I look at the interviews. Again, talent is in common with the map for the DSOs. The climate framework is also in common with the DSOs, but there's a difference in the perspectives on the importance of decommissioning for the TSOs and the importance of cyber threats for the DSOs. And I think that's probably very naturally understandable. But let's turn to the interviews to have a little deeper look. If I could have the next slide. So, of course, the TSO leaders are very concerned about decommissioning as a critical uncertainty because of the reliability concerns. If we shift out an asset, we want to know where is the extra capacity coming from, and is it going to be reliable, affordable, and integratable. So these are the issues that on decommissioning. Of course, we have a similar issue around talent as a critical uncertainty, as needing to deal with new ways of attracting talent, but also the challenges of upskilling, because the industry is facing new ways of transmitting energy. And this is, it's not just a question of attracting talent, but also reskilling the workforce. And that issue that comes out through the interviews, but doesn't stand out so clearly from the issues map, is that we see that AI and machine learning are particularly important areas for asset management for the TSO energy leaders. If I move to the next slide, if I pull out some of the, what are some of the commonalities and the differences between the DSO and the TSO issues monitor maps. Again, we don't have time tracking, so I can't give you any time series data, but we can look at where do the top issues fit. We see that digitalization, decentralization, and decarbonisation drivers, in particular renewable energies, are priority action spaces for both the distribution and transmission system operators. And also that talent, climate framework, and EU cohesion emerge as some of the critical uncertainties. In terms of some of the differences between the segmentation analysis in Europe for the DSO and TSO and our global map of what is keeping energy leaders awake at night, there are two reflections that we can pull out. The first is that commodity prices are seen as less relevant by both the DSOs and TSOs in Europe than by the global pool of energy leaders we survey from across the world. And secondly, a second global difference is that the hydrogen economy and land use are seen by both DSOs and TSOs with a much higher priority than the global average. And also, talent is seen with a much higher priority as a critical uncertainty by the DSOs and TSOs in Europe than the global map implies. So I've just given some very top-line results about the DSO segmentation map, the TSO segmentation map, and some of the commonalities and differences between those maps and the global and regional picture. Next slide, please. The survey's overall message is that energy leaders are telling us that while innovation policies and technologies towards achieving decarbonisation must continue, that we mustn't forget that the new energy system also has to be socially affordable, accessible and secure. And that secure also means cyber secure. It doesn't just mean reliability of energy systems anymore. So let me stop there because that's already a lot of information. And let me encourage people to ask questions or comments. Let me invite those. And let me say, I think it's a really fascinating snapshot that we have of being able to compare and contrast these different segmentation analyses within Europe, as well as between the segment and the European picture and the global picture. Thank you.
Many thanks, Angela, for this very interesting introduction. And I think we should also again refer to the World Energy Council's issues monitor that is each year fascinating and very detailed on regions, the global perspective, and shows all the changes. It was very interesting for us to discover how we are different from the other trends. I'm very happy now to hand over to Laurent Schmitt. Laurent Schmitt is since now 3 years the Secretary General of ENTSO-E, and he was before the Global Smart Grid Strategy Leader at General Electric Grid Solutions, has been working in Europe, the US and Asia, and has also been working before for Alstom in France. So many thanks, Laurent, and you have the word.
Yes, thank you, Suzanne. And first of all, I would like to thank you with sincerely all the work which has been done with the World Energy Council. And Angela, this was really been an excellent relationship. And I think this is really fruitful input for our strategic dialogue within the association. And thank you, Suzanne and Norela, for having championed this initiative inside our organization. Okay, so I will, the objective of my presentation is to come back on some of these interesting outcomes and try to analyze how are we against our existing roadmap and what we are current, how does what we have in our strategic priorities fit basically what we discovered through these inputs. I think first of all, what is very interesting to know is that this survey was responded by senior leaders of TSO. So it's really input coming from the boardrooms, if I may say, of our TSO members. So it's highlighting what is really strategic. And just a few words to say that we ENTSO-E focus our efforts onto European TSOs matters. 43 members, 36 countries, and really spanning on topics from grid developments, security of supply, market design, and of course research and innovation. And I think that that initiative has been championed through our research and innovation team, who has a role of basically checking and being a hub of all the best innovation happening in our TSO community. So if I come back to basically the slide which was just presented by Angela, and I will just want to say that we had some interesting return from a large number of our TSO members, and I'm going to comment on two different sides. What keeps basically our TSO community awake at night, if I'm looking in terms of impact and uncertainty, is really as what we are topics related to decommissioning, artificial intelligence and talents as an example, as well as, of course, the constant question on how is the European regulations going to stay, I would say, aligned from a cohesion perspective. And I must say that what we have been discovering through the last year with the negotiation on the clean energy package is that it has actually stayed very, very aligned. And the last miles of the clean energy package negotiation for us have been a surprise in how fast it has actually matured, converged, and been finalized, showing, I think, at least a cohesion of EU countries when it comes to electricity and energy related matters. What I want to highlight here is two elements as well. One on the decommissioning part. I think that is a very important question. One of the fundamental questions is we do see a rapid transformation of our system with large amount of renewable being introduced, basically pushing out progressively older assets and CO2, I would say asset polluting, generally speaking, while we see CO2 price increasing. And so here I just want to highlight that we also have our round of scenarios calculation as well. And so you see here what was produced now in 2018 on our own scenarios, where we are, as part of our grid planning exercise, together with TSOs, we are really looking at how does the system evolve between now 2020 up to 2040, and looking through various scenarios of introduction of further introduction of more distributed resources, meaning the solar PV distributed assets winning the game, or on the other side, more scenarios related to global climate action, so stronger country commitments, in which case, of course, assets are more developing on the side of offshore wind, and or basically also having sustainable transition scenarios where we see kind of a balanced development of renewable and wind. So why are these scenarios particularly important for us? Is because they are the only way to anticipate how the grid architecture is going to change. And of course, as part of that comes the constant question on how are we going to see the phasing out and the decommissioning of some assets. And I want to say that the clean energy package from that point of view has brought a lot of new perspective here with the introduction of national energy and climate plan, which are going to drive more the mainstream scenarios moving forward, as well as a much more focus on adequacy and on basically a pan-European adequacy calculation, which are going to further enrich all the scenarios, and with the prime purpose of having a better aligned view of how this grid system in Europe is going to transition between now 2030, 40 and 50, knowing that Europe seems to really head into a fully decarbonized system as much as possible and at the latest by 2050. When I compare, another question was a question which we could wonder around this emergence of artificial intelligence in the strategic priorities of our agenda. And I would like to relate this to the work which we did in our research and innovation team on analyzing, basically surveying among the 140 research and innovation projects happening in our TSO community environment, what are the most proeminent trends. And I think here we see artificial intelligence and machine learning coming on really on the top. I think that confirms what the CEOs in a way says. And I would like to relate it also back to the Gartner hype cycle, and where is the with this artificial intelligence located, and we see it in the deep neural nets, which I think is really the next step of this deep learning, and basically making the tools as operational as possible into a real-time control room environment. And we see here that really this topic being at the top of the hype cycle, still we will go into the disillusion phase and so on. So there is still, in a way, time to I would say, develop and learn from it. But it's clear that it is coming as a very important element, as well as digital twin. I would just like to highlight here, we are currently deploying a common grid model at the pan-European level, which is kind of calculating a digital twin of the pan-European system several times a day. And that's definitely one of our core ongoing developments. So it is clear that it's not what keeps us awake on long term, but on pretty short term as well. When I'm looking at more the impact and lower uncertainty, I think obviously market design is coming on the top. The good news is the clean energy package is definitely clarifying a lot of things. Still a lot of work which we need to do in terms of methodologies, development of market designs, but I think our experts in the TSO communities are fully mobilized on that. A lot of work is being done, and I'm confident in the next 3 years a lot of it will be achieved, and I think this will hopefully get out of this most priority item. I also see new, again, digitization and IoT blockchain coming as big topic. I think this blockchain topic is quite a fascinating area, and it is obviously raising question on how transaction and microtransaction are going to be managed in the future at the edge of our system, linking it back with traditional wholesale market clearing systems, and also triggering several questions on the role of various actors, basically algorithmic trading coming into place, virtualization of some functions, and so on. So for sure, it is also clearly digitization, blockchain, a very important element of this next development. To talk and come back on the market design and digital, I think on that slide, it kind of summarizes our very short-term roadmap of what we currently are doing in terms of implementing new market codes and operation code, flow-based market, real-time markets, capacity calculation, new emergency and restoration methodologies, new flexibility platform across TSO DSO, active system management. I think this is really the core of our agenda in the next 3 years in terms of implementation. So we are all on board to make this happen as early as possible. It's a must if we want to achieve the next step of the renewable integration transition. Of course, a lot of questions on transparency, where are the capacity available, recognizing that the grid is facing new congestion difficulties and new way of collaborating across the level of TSOs, DSOs, regional security coordinators, and ENTSO-E, and trying to bring, I would say, more digital tool to be able to facilitate this collaboration. So in terms of vision, it's clear that the system, we do have an existing project trying to define the vision for 2030, how we see the system evolving. It's evolving into from a centralized into a decentralized system. I think this is pretty clear, and a set of decentralized systems. So what I'm usually calling systems of systems. The power systems become a power system of systems, and what is very important is to keep this system interconnecting with each other and avoid fragmentation of subsystems and deconnection of subsystems, which would really be suboptimal. So all what we are working in our active system management report and our vision is trying to foster and bring this one system vision together while recognizing this new architecture and notion of systems of systems. The topic of high uncertainty and considerable impact, I think the question of hydrogen is high on the agenda. Sector coupling, how can we get this organized? Cyber threats, cyber security. So here I want to highlight the starting work which happens with the European Commission on defining how are we going to do this sector coupling and what is going to be the role of hydrogen gas, but not only hydrogen gas, but also heat, electrical vehicles, basically connecting the dots, not only of the electrical system and the digital grid, if I may say, but beyond, and being able to decarbonize the entire industry, as an example, with green gas. And there is still a lot of uncertainty and idea to develop innovation. As an example, I would just take that it would not make too much sense to build electrolyzer into the systems to produce green hydrogen and producing with running coal plants, which would be detrimental to I would say to the logic of decarbonizing the system. So we see really the need for having and expanding this data layer across this sector coupling. Regional cooperation and cybersecurity. I think cybersecurity is definitely also on the top of our agenda. It may become a bit less on our side than on what I heard from the DSO, because we have already, and particularly TSOs have moved already strongly into the investment in that space in relation to the new NIS directive happening in every country. TSOs are usually obviously recognized as operator of vital importance, and so that immediately drives significant investment in terms of protection of their assets. I think one element which we are still doing work within ENTSO-E is building, I would say, this same level of security horizontally across Europe, and we have defined a new cybersecurity strategy to manage not only the vertical side of our TSO community, but I would call it the horizontal side together with the regional security coordinators. So that's what, in a nutshell, we wanted to say today. There is a lot of ongoing research and innovation into that part, and I think I just want to advertise the events which will happen at the end of this year on 13th of November, which will be a dual event for us because it's the 10 years anniversary of ENTSO-E, and we are very proud to have lived and being so active during these 10 years and animating this very vibrant TSO community. And we would really advocate, if you want to know more on these particular topics, all strategic topics, particularly digital development, investment, linked with the clean energy package, how does this EU cohesion going to play in the future, to contribute and participate to our events. I think that's usually a recognized event every 2 years, where we do we take stock of how far is this electrical system transformation is moving from our TSO's perspective. So thank you for attending, and very open to questions.
Many thanks, Laurent. We take the questions at the end, and I'm very happy now to introduce our last but not least speaker, and that is Juan Marco from E.DSO. ETSO for smart grids, as we all know it, and Juan has only recently enrolled in ETSO. He's seconded by Iberdrola Distribution as a senior technical advisor, and he's working in ETSO on project development in the smart grids related technologies. So I'm very happy to have you here, Juan Marco, and to explain to us the perspective from the distribution system operators.
Hello, thank you, Susanne. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to speak today on the topic of energy evolution and how the energy transition is changing not only the networks, but also the risks and opportunities within the energy sector. If you move to the next slide. Let me start introducing ourselves a little bit. E.DSO, the European Distribution System Operator, is one of the 4 electricity DSO associations, but the only one 100% focused on bundled electrical distribution. Next. You may have to hit it another way. Okay. Our members connect over 70% of the customers in Europe with more than 350 million meters and through more than 7 million kilometers of high voltage, medium voltage, and of course low voltage up to the customers' meters. Additionally, although E.DSO only focuses on Europe, some of our members share their experience from abroad, like Enel in Latin America, EDP in Brazil, or Iberdrola in the US, for example. Next. As you can see, our representation is quite spread over Europe. We have 42 members over close to 23 countries, and hopefully we'll have by the end of the year more representations through Europe, because we're expecting a couple of new DSOs to join us from 2 different countries. Next. Now getting down to the businesses. On the E.DSO graph that we see in the Issues Monitor 2019, we're able to identify clearly the risk that keep our bosses awake at night and the priorities that keep our experts on their toes. I guess that these 2 things can be defined as defining the new role of DSOs in the future. Let's say, what are the new rules of the game? What are the security issues on our systems as our systems become smart, and who and what skills they need to work on this new role. Also, secondly, being efficient and keeping our customers happy will be, which in the long run is what we're all about. What our customers need for innovative transport, what we can offer them for digitalization and smart meters, and how to get to that decentralized system that they require. Next one. We cannot deny that we are and we need a clean energy transition from big coal energy plants far away to wind, solar, and other clean energy sources that may be even in our backyards. As a matter of fact, most renewable generation is and will be connected to the distribution grid. I would also like to point out that even though technologies are evolving quite rapidly and they have changed a lot through the last 100 years that we started our businesses, the use of new technologies and services will not be enough to the complete integration of renewables. We still need to manage and build new assets for that. The key for this will be, of course, to build a smart, adequate, and active system based on an attractive investment model through a stable, sustainable regulatory framework in Europe. Let me highlight attractive and stable. On the next slide. DSOs need to digitalize their operation and planning process, enabling highly dynamic energy system and all layers and time scales to develop. E.DSO welcomes the possibility of empowering prosumers by enabling them to engage in collective energy initiatives, integration of renewables, creation of local markets, cost-effective grid expansion, and promote electromobility as some of these examples. I would like to point out that we see, and we have been working quite hard on the way that smart cities will facilitate the energy transition, particularly in promoting the wider uptake of renewable energy and new energy service at the citizens level. Next slide, please. The energy industry is facing constant changes, as you all know. Even though some parts of our networks are over 40 years old and were not designed for today, we have seen through these last few years how our grids, even in low voltage, becomes first visible to grid operators and then smart for our data scientists. We have also seen how the information from this change available to our customers through their smart meters has given opportunity to make smart choices with respect to capacity requirement and energy consumption times. This new role that our customers will demand will impact the evolution of DSO models, without forgetting the rights of non-active customers and, of course, keeping a reliable service for all. Next one. We're moving from a physical grid to a digital grid as operators are implementing the use of new technologies and communication infrastructure to advance management and operation in the network. I will not run long over the wonderful things that technology does to our grid, as most of you already know: automation in remote areas, fault detection technology, sensors in secondary substations, etc. But I would like to point out what a smart meter means not only for DSO but to the customer as well. Not only it improves the way DSOs interact with their customers, the way we talk to each other, smart meters will provide information to be efficient, and they will allow to integrate clean energy locally generated in our grids. As well, that information will help us reduce investment to increase capacity in our systems to a minimum. Next. All this information and technology is giving customer and other stakeholders new digital rules of engagement with us. We're reshaping the utility sector. Keeping up with these new developments will not only require grid operators to change their models, but also what skills they develop or hire for their employees. We're moving from electrical engineers to computer science, or from overhead line construction to IT platform development. The data that will provide the digital grids will give us more control and flexibility over what we need, but it will require for our people, our employees, to change dramatically from what we used to do 10, 15 years ago to what our customers demand in the future. Next. But not only, it's not everything about data. Linking and upgrading infrastructure and technologies with citizens' behavior and new services in key sectors will improve competitiveness and sustainability in our cities. We have to think that our businesses will change from a closed to passive network to an active system to provide grounds for flexibility uses and operation, and also to increase the possibilities to adapt to cleaner energies to other industries like heat and transportation. Nowadays, we see that most transportation are dependent on carbon fuels, and that some heat requirements are still very dependent on wood or coal, even within Europe. The other day I was in a presentation where they said that 4% of the pollution in Milano was still due to pizza ovens, wooden pizza ovens. Unlike electrifications of other sectors will help us get to those clean energy targets that we are all eager to get. Next. On this slide, I will only introduce some key points developed by our stakeholder council on the evolution of customers and DSOs. First, DSOs need to be perceived as reliable partners. Technology innovation must be beneficial, helping customers to get what they really want. New flexible and dynamic pricing options granting fair treatments will be offered to all customers. Incentives should help operators to make use of flexibility service and distributed energy resources while ensuring a cost-effective energy system. And not only for prosumers, it will, we have to think that we have to take care of all customers within our networks. These key points take me to my last slide. Besides their classical responsibility for operating and maintaining the grids, DSOs increasingly take up new functions based on development of new technologies. Responsibilities, of course, grow as well. To continue providing a safe and reliable system that allows customers to play the role in the energy transition, we will need to keep up with technology risk as cybersecurity, to improve the skills of our workforce, talent, and a steady regulatory framework to foster grid investment and technology development. Thank you.
Many thanks, Juan Marco. This takes us now to the end of the presentations and to the start of the questions. I have not seen so far questions from the 90 attendees, so I invite you once more, if you have questions to our panelists, please send them by drop us a line. And then you see on the screen now, you can ask a question and we are going to take it up. But in the meantime, I would like to ask a question to Laurent on the following point. Laurent, what is the reason, according to you, why the TSOs are not seeing cyber as a major factor? Because the DSOs see it as a major factor. How could you interpret this?
So thank you, Suzanne, for this interesting question. What I would say is the managing security of supply of the system is really the core DNA of TSOs, and I would say that naturally drives probably the TSO community to anticipate that significant potential impact of cyber threats onto the security of the system. Is what I was saying in my presentation is we do see in some countries very significant effort and investment being made. I think, having said that, the strategy which we have in that space is not to claim that we are perfectly and cyber protected, because we realize in the same time that the threats change, increases, becomes more political. Europe being in a way between Russia and US is potentially vulnerable, and so I think we are still doing significant efforts in preparing for possible incidents, in developing risk preparedness methodologies, and in basically working on this new cybersecurity network codes, which we think is very important to lay the basis of this horizontality of cybersecurity across Europe. So, in a nutshell, it is maybe perceived as a bit less of a difficulty because actions have definitely been started very thoroughly, but we are not at the end of the tunnel, and it is a constant improvement to perfect security of supply, and we have a lot of work to do ahead of us. I think our digital committee is very mobilized on that particular aspect.
Thank you very much, Laurent, for this answer. And I think it's also maybe there's so many issues that are currently shaking up the life of the TSOs. Decommissioning is mentioned as one of those, but also talent and the competition with the Googles of this world, that maybe it's just like a little bit further away, while indeed you insisted on the reality whereby through ENTSO-E there's a lot of actions going on cyber security. But maybe you also, Juan Marco, want to answer on this point. Why is it then more of an issue for the DSOs in a way? Why is it an issue today for the DSO community?
I think that the wider or the more spread your system is, the more vulnerable it is. I think that we have always worried about people hacking into our systems, and now we have to start thinking about people hacking into our customers and then affecting our networks. When we say that we're really worried about somebody hacking into our system, that doesn't really mean that they hack into our meter and they change the value of the reading, or they are able to turn on and off a sector or an area or a city, because we have already taken care of that. The problem nowadays that we face is that now everything is smart. We have smartphones, we have we have computers, we have smart toasters, let's say. So the problem now is if somebody hacks every single electrical vehicle while they are connected to our grid, what happens? What can 100,000 cars do to our networks and to everyone if they are hacked and they change the requirements for charging?
Marco, maybe Angela, you also want to say something on this point of cybersecurity. What is your findings in the issues monitor globally and by region on this particular matter?
I think I'll answer slightly differently. I mean, we do find cybersecurity a big issue amongst all different parts of the energy sector, globally and regionally, because digitization is accelerating its impact across the whole energy system. It's not just within electrification. We also have digital twins in oil and gas. There's lots of different aspects of energy. Nuclear is relying on digitalization to help it with its project management costs. So digitalization is an issue for all different parts of the energy sector, and also increasingly for the blurring of the boundary between the energy system and the cyber system and these other adjacent sectors such as transport and buildings. What I'd like to say is we don't just do the issues monitor, we also have a dynamic resilience program. And what we do with that is we look at what types of threat and threat response are different companies and countries putting in place, and what can they learn from each other. We recently did something on simulations of 3 different types of cyber insecurity challenges. We did one based on a hack into the network via a solar farm. We did another based on a hack on a malicious state security issue, which was around a digital code patch upgrade. And we also did a simulation around space weather and its implications for transmission in particular. So what we find is actually there's only so far you can go with preparedness if you don't actually get the system together in rehearsing how they would actually manage through these crises. And in the managing through, we revealed that actually everybody's making assumptions about what everybody else is going to do, and there's still an awful lot of slippage. There's still a lot of work to do on really aligning on communications plans and setting these whole system responses in place effectively, not just by all the different operators, but also with the governments.
Thank you for that, Angela. And then maybe just to follow up with another question also to you. Talent is seen as an uncertainty by TSOs and DSOs. Why is it not mentioned by the community much more?
I think every sector has some form of talent issue. On the global map, it sits bang smack in the middle of the landscape. So if you want to compare where it is compared with the European or the DSO or the TSO segment maps, it's right in the center of the crosswires of the quadrant at the global level. So it's partly that can be an average effect. In some regions, it's a very high issue. In some sectors, it's a much higher issue. In others, it's less. I think it's not just that it has a different emphasis, it's that the challenges themselves are different. But the common challenge across all the energy sectors is the challenge that energy is considered to be a less attractive, less exciting, less interesting sector for many of the new professionals that are coming out who've got skills in digital and they've got skills in engineering. They tend to be attracted to other sectors. On the back of that, there's still a huge requirement for engineering talent, not just for cyber and digital talent within the sector. And increasingly, because we're facing more demanding, empowered consumers, the whole service, the growth in services is bringing the requirement for much more servicification and customer orientation. And that's true for all parts of the energy system in all different regions, but the front line where this is being seen as happening and eroding or creating talent wars first and foremost is really in the electricity sector, which is accelerating in its growth. and particularly the talent challenges for DSO and TSO. So I think we would, at the global picture, it tends to be, it's more of an averaging effect. If you take it into the different segments or into the different regions, you'll see it much more pronounced.
Many thanks for this. Really interesting to see in a way this combined effect of less interesting as a sector compared to the more fancy ones in a way, but also the need for the continuous support by the classical engineering talents. I've got now a couple of questions from the audience, and there's one for you, Laurent, by Elizabeth Adeva. She's asking, could you give some example of what is artificial intelligence and machine learning relevant for the TSOs as they have been answering it?
Yeah, so we are definitely looking at that, I think, as part of our Innovation Hub activity into ENTSO-E. And we have trying to look at what are the suitable use cases for artificial intelligence. I think our last webinar was on artificial intelligence, if I remember well. And so we do see various use cases emerging, probably some around asset life cycle, asset aging, making use of asset data to be able to better project awareness of assets. I think there were a few others around improving what I would call the market operation, the old forecasts, which TSOs have to do with various scales, from few days ahead down to very close to real time when it comes to, of course, load forecasts, demand response forecasts, renewable forecasts. There is obviously something to consider on making a bridge with the data from the grid itself with new source of data, meteo stations, whatever, available. I think there are also a more sophisticated one, which we start to look is in the new generation of control room. The webinar last time was made by RTE, I think, was explaining how they are trying to progressively introduce artificial intelligence as a new decision support tool for situational awareness in the grid, and basically being able to run in parallel to the traditional deterministic calculation which we do for n-1, and which still needs to continue for because these are critical for security of supply, but basically adding new sets of tools into this decision-making process, and really trying to push that artificial intelligence as far as possible into the real-time environment, but with taking the necessary precaution, because several of the control room tools are still crucial for security of supply and need a very firm and deterministic decision at the end of the day.
Thanks a lot, Laurent, for this. And continuing with the questions, we have two questions that relate to the data hubs. This is by Mario Bruno Ferreira, but also Martin Fabok. In a way, they are asking what is the role of the TSOs and DSOs with respect to the data hubs? And are these also supporting TSO DSO collaborations? I would suggest that we start with Juan, and then Laurent, you can answer this as well.
I will have to say that data hubs will indeed support the TSO DSOs. I mean, like data nowadays is becoming crucial for everything, and as smart grids develop and we have a lot more information close to real time sometimes on the networks, and we have historical background or the historical data to compare consumer needs or asset management requirements. I think that we will have an advantage over what we did 10, 15 years ago. And of course, to manage local generation, it will be key to see the energy flows and what data we receive from the TSO or the TSO from the DSO in order to accommodate all the like to make the system reliable and completely balanced.
Laurent, you would like to?
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Suzanne, for this interesting question. So, a few points I would like to make. First, I don't like the term data hub because at the end of the day, every grid operator has a data hub of certain data, and I think we should be careful here on not jumping on smart meter data hub or other renewable data meter data. I think every public grid operator regulated has, in a way, a data hub. And by the way, ENTSO-E does have one with our transparency platform. We've seen the number of people connecting to this multiplied by 20 in 3 years time. So there is a lot of activity around that. So the question is not about the data hub itself. The question is how to exchange data between data hub, how to connect data hub together, how to distribute, I would say, these processes across the system. And what we start seeing among our various initiatives in Europe, and we have our interface project, TSO DSO, which is just kicking off now, is the next phase of this data hub is how can we interconnect data hub together in Europe and to kind of foster more activity into retail markets and more customer switching into retail markets, and then bring this activity into further flexibility into the wholesale markets and further options for either balancing our systems or managing congestion and so on. So I think we do see a trend of analyzing how to interconnect, how to manage data exchange, how to architect this connectivity, and I think that's what we need to continue to work in the future, and that's going to be one of the key topics of, as an example, the interface project.
Many thanks, Laurent, for this. And I think it's important to recall here, of course, that the party that is running the data hub has to be neutral. It can't be a market party that would give a privileged access to any other party. That's why this neutrality requirement for the one that is running the data hub is really a paramount. And we see, for example, in the UK that an independent third party, not TSO, not DSO, are running this. So there's several models in Europe. But coming back to our issues, let's say, what is keeping the CEOs awake at night and busy in the day, we've also seen blockchain. That looks very important for the TSOs, but this is not the case for the distribution system operators. And I would like to, for this concluding question, to have, again, Laurent, Juan Marco, but also Angela to comment on the role of blockchain.
Okay, so I think blockchain is a fascinating technology from our hand. We see blockchain being tried in several demonstration pilots across Europe, and I think the natural reason of looking at it is because, of course, the work of facilitating markets is in the DNA of TSOs now for 10 years, and it comes as when you facilitate these markets and when you do manage marketplaces together with the power exchange, you naturally are exposed to the issue of transactions, clearing of transactions, and here come the fundamental question on when you distribute this transaction at the micro level at the edge of the system, this famous peer-to-peer question. The question is, how do you make sure this peer-to-peer stays in a way consistent still with the main system transaction principle? And also the question is, how can you scale up or down the cost? I would say scale down the cost associated to this transaction, because of course, if you start doing kilowatt or watt-hour transaction every day, the business model of this transaction is totally different than if you do hundreds of kilowatt-hour or even megawatt-hour every day. And I think there is a fundamental question here on how is this blockchain going to evolve this. On the top of that comes this issue of certification carbon footprint sector coupling. How are we going to ensure a consistent, I would say, certification across maybe gas and electrical sector? How are we going to avoid electrolyzer do not run on coal? I think there is definitely a lot of use cases which are interesting to further investigate, related to sector coupling or business case like that.
You, Juan Marco?
Hi, I guess that our requirements for our day-to-day business are different. We have not seen so many peer-to-peer transactions. We get the electricity from you guys, from TSOs, and we distribute it to our customers. So most of our transactions do not have to be that secure. I mean, like with our customers, we basically, our transaction is we send the bill and we get paid. We don't need to have an extremely secure way to deal with that. I guess that in the future, as energy transition moves on, it will become important for us, but I think that our day-to-day requirements do not focus on blockchain right now. But as I said, I mean, like we have also pilots, and we have been looking into the technology and the tool as well. But I mean, like I guess that our requirements are not as the TSOs have.
And Angela, what is your view on blockchain for the energy value chain and the role in the next years? What do you expect for the next issues monitor with respect to blockchain?
Well, in addition to the issues monitor, we also do some deep digging down into these new innovation technologies and look for use cases. And we've just earlier this year, I think we launched our second blockchain report, which had a variety of use cases, none of which were included DSOs or TSOs. But what I would say is blockchain's an enabling technology. It's nothing by itself. It's being the use cases are, around DSOs or TSOs. There's lots around transaction costs are expensive, but emerging blockchain platforms are coming out and costs are coming down fast. There's the possibility of, asset traceability, the renewable registries, the certification that's been talked about. Our view is that peer-to-peer, though, is some way off. It's not. It's peer-to-market is much more is with us, but peer-to-peer is an awful long way off. There are, of course, blockchain is likely as an enabling technology to have a faster learning curve than we currently expect, but we still think peer-to-peer is in the distant future. Peer-to-market and other use cases are much more relevant at present.
Okay, so this takes us now to the end of this webinar, and I encourage you to look at the publications on ENTSO-E's website, on EDSO's website, and of course the REC website. And I'm very happy to invite you already to the next webinar. And this webinar takes place for those that are not in holidays, but even from holidays you can join. Beauty of the virtual on 23rd July, 10:30. We are looking into power facts. This is a genuine ENTSO-E product that we started in January 2019, and that looks into facts and figures underpinning the energy transition and in particular the power network. So we would be very happy to see you again on 23 July. And if you have any questions, any comments on these webinars, please drop us a mail. Many thanks for your attention. Many thanks to the speakers for their excellent contributions today.